filibuster IPA. Good morning. Welcome to the 138th meeting of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. This meeting is being televised. Is it okay with committee members if we, there's going to be a vote, if we carry on until about 10 minutes before the vote? And then we'll come back with, there's a lot of questions I think people have, and it's a great, very important meeting. And really like to thank all our people for coming. Today in response, and thank you for agreeing to my request to come, and thank you to the clerk of the House of Commons for agreeing as well to my request to have this meeting, which I hope is the beginning of a few. Today in response to the committee's request, the House Administration has organized a briefing on the Centre Block Rehabilitation Project. From the House, we are pleased to be joined by Stéphane Aubé, Chief Information Officer, Susan Kulba, Senior Director and Executive Architect, Real Property Directorate, and Lisette Comeau, Senior Architectural Strategist, Real Property Directorate. Here from Centrus Architects are Larry Malsick, Lead Representative, and Duncan Broyd, Functional Program Lead. Rob Wright, Assistant Deputy Minister, Parliamentary Precinct Branch, is also here from Public Services and Procurement Canada.
There's someone added there. There's someone, Jennifer Garrett was added at the last minute.
Oh, and Jennifer Garrett, welcome. And you're with? Public Service? Okay. I just want to mention in the Hill Times you have in front of you, the speaker's written an article. I just want to read one quote from it. It was why this meeting is so important. That is why the design process will involve parliamentarians. Their understanding and perspectives on the workings of Canada's parliamentary democracy are essential to the design. As caretakers of our parliamentary democracy, they must be engaged throughout the process in a substantial way. So, parliamentarians are not architects or engineers. We wouldn't get into those details, but Parliament wouldn't be here without parliamentarians. That's why it's here, and they know from their experience what works and what doesn't, and have very valuable input. And so it's very important that, you know, when I choose a home, I get to design it so it works for the things I need. I don't do the engineering of it or anything, so that's why it's very important that we have this meeting, and as the speaker has mentioned, ongoing participation throughout the process. So this is very important, and we really appreciate you coming here, having all this expertise, and so that we know how and when we will be able to continue this process to make sure that our input is instrumental in the design. So I'm not sure how many people are doing opening. Who's doing the opening comments?
Susan Kulba will, Mr. Bagwell.
Okay, and well, there's lots of questions, so if we have to extend, or we'll see what we do if we can't get through them all. Okay, so you're on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Je suis Susan Kulba.
Name is Susan Kulba. I'm the Senior Director and Executive Architect for the House of Commons.
Who's responsible for the Centre Block project. I'm under Digital Services and Real Property at the House of Commons, led by the CIO, Stéphane Aubé, and with me, one of my architects on my team, Lisette Comeau, who's the architectural strategist for Heritage. We have with us also Larry Malik, who is from Centrus. It's a design consortium that's been hired by PSPC for the Centre Block program. He's the lead representative, and Duncan Broyd is the functional program lead representative. We have Rob Wright, the ADM from PSPC, who is responsible for the overall program, and Jennifer Garrett, the Director General of PSPC, responsible for the Centre Block. We thank the committee very much for inviting us here today to hear from you and to engage with you. It's opportune time in the project where we're in the functional requirement gathering phase of the project, and it's very important to us to have the input from parliamentarians. You represent Canadians all over this great country, and we want to hear from you as to what's important to be incorporated into the building program of works. We're here to hear about two aspects. One is more at a philosophy level of what's important about Canada today and what you would like to see inspire us in the design of this renovation program. We're also very, very interested in looking forward to your valuable contribution on the functional requirement. How does this building work for you currently? How do you see it working for you in the future? What doesn't work? What is a future parliamentarian going to be doing in this building, and how can we design for the next 50 years of parliamentary activities? So essentially, the Centre Block is not just a renovation of this great historic building, it's also involving an addition of a new visitor welcome centre, and we're looking at ways of modernizing this building and creating space for the future functions of an evolving parliament. So it's very important to have your opinions and your perspective on how it is to function here. We look we look to the original design by Pearson, where he really did a fantastic job on this building, incorporating the past, the present, and the future. And it's our opportunity right now to go forward and to incorporate a new layer of heritage in these new renovations. So we're here to really to seek your feedback, and we will continue to engage. As you mentioned, our speaker is very interested in having parliamentary engagement all the way through the project, and so it's very significant for us to be here and to continue that engagement through the board to parliamentarians throughout the project. We have been working quite a lot together on this project in terms of establishing the base requirements, but in doing so, what we've been doing is investigative work on the existing building to inform the future project. And so there's been some enabling projects which is going to allow us to segregate this building and have a better understanding of the physical makeup and the historical fabric of the building. We've put together a vision statement, and we've had engagement with the clerk and the speaker on that, and we'll essentially share that with you and then open up for discussion. So the vision as written today is l'édifice du centre abrite le
Centre Block is the home of the nation's federal parliament. Our vision for the rehabilitation of Centre Block is to safeguard and honor its heritage as the epicenter of Canadian democracy, to support the work of parliamentarians, to accommodate the institution's evolving needs, to enhance the visitor experience, and to modernize the building's infrastructure.
For questions and comments and discussion.
Okay, so there was another opening. Okay, great. I'd also like to welcome Jennifer Ditchburn, who's refer people to a great, excellent article in Policy Options on this topic. And as you said, form follows function, and we certainly hope to provide you the form that we need. And it's ironic we're having this meeting in the reading room. It was the reading room where the fire started, that the original Centre Block burned down. So I think we'll try and do one round of questions with every party, and then we'll maybe open up to have the open format after that. So we've 22 minutes till the bells, so we've got about 12 minutes. So we'll start with Mr. Yeah?
We know we can make it in time. Why don't we make it 5 minutes for each party? That'll leave us at 15. We'll still have 7 minutes to get to the House.
Okay, and we'll come back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is he on the bus?
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Biddle.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here today. And you talked about consulting parliamentarians in terms of, and I guess I don't understand in terms of how to seek, I guess, the committee's feedback at this particular point, because we're asking questions and you're answering questions, so it's not necessarily a good mechanism to provide feedback, but question is to consultation of parliamentarians. Has that happened? Will it happen? What's the timeline look like on that if it hasn't happened?
So to date, there has been consultation with the Speaker, and we're at the very early phases. The next phase will be to brief you and then go to the board and establish a way for that consultation to happen.
Okay. Do we have any timeline for when that will begin, or a best guess?
We expect that in January we'll have a plan that we can come back with.
Okay. Is there an intention to consult with members of the public? I know as parliamentarians and staff here at the House of Commons, we sometimes believe this is our workplace, but it belongs to the people of Canada. So is there a plan for consultations with the public?
Well, to date, we had expected that parliamentarians would be feeding us back some information and expectations of their constituents, but PSPC has indicated that we can do public consultation if we feel that it would be worthwhile.
Okay. For many decades, there's been a workplace set aside for members of the press gallery with desks and phones. Will that room still exist in Centre Block?
Currently, that is the plan.
Okay. Do we know in terms of the size yet? Have decisions been made whether that will increase, decrease, stay the same?
No, we're way too early in the project for that at this point.
And will consultations happen with the press gallery?
Yes, of course.
Do we have a timetable on that?
Over the next 6 months, what we will be doing, aside from the parliamentary consultations, we'll be meeting with all the service providers to Parliament, whether it be House of Commons internal service providers or the press gallery, as an example, gathering their very detailed requirements. We do that on every project, where then we establish what their functional needs are, and we work with those user groups throughout the project.
So no decisions have been made on or final decisions have been made in terms of assignment of rooms and office spaces and those types of things? No, sir.
We're very early in the project. We're still, as we say, gathering what the requirements are. At some point, we'll have a good idea of what those requirements are, and then we'll need to balance that with all the various priorities of heritage and life safety, and come up with a schematic at that point. So we're way before that in the project.
Can you, I guess, help me out here? And the chair mentioned that we're definitely not architects or engineers, but in terms of this process going parallel with construction and or demolition of and renovation work in this building, what's happening in the first 6 months to a year that is going to allow this consultation period to run parallel to actual work being carried out in the building?
So once the building closes in January, there's a whole decommissioning phase, and that's expected to take up to 9 months to actually decommission the building, remove all of the House of Commons and Senate infrastructure and furniture and all, prepare the building for some of that future construction. In the meantime, what PSPC will also be doing is carrying out intrusive investigations. You've started to see some of that work already. You'll see enclosures in the hallways and various offices, and that's why it was important to start moving some of the members out earlier, so that we could start the minimal amount of investigative work, and once it's fully vacated, we will do the remainder of that investigative work. There's a lot of hazardous substances that we can't just normally carry out some of that work in a fully occupied building. So there's a full amount of work that needs to be done so that we can understand how this building is made. We have information in drawings from the original architects, but what we found out already is that it hasn't been built according to those plans. So it's very imperative that we do that investigative work to inform things like design, schedule, cost, etc. So we're very early in that process, and that's what the kind of activity that will be happening in parallel to the requirements gathering.
At what point, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate this place has to be taken apart and put back together like a jigsaw puzzle with many of the historic features, but at what time in the process does there have to be essentially a final plan so that the rehabilitation and construction can take place in terms of room designation and sizes and allocation and those types of things. And I guess also keeping in mind this parallel consultation process, what's the time frame on that?
Maybe we can jump in here from Public Service Procurement Canada. Thank you for the question. So as Ms. Kulba indicated, 2019 will really be a parallel activity of focusing on getting a full assessment of the condition of the building and on developing the functional program for the building. Those are the two key activities that will allow us to develop a scope and schedule and budget for the facility. And that's based on many years of lessons learned and best practices to be able to establish an approach and design so that real construction can then begin. So those, over the next year, it will really be those parallel paths of focusing on what is the expectation for Parliament for this facility to deliver for future parliamentarians, and what is the actual condition of the building and what needs to be done to make sure that it will serve parliamentarians and Canadians for the next century.
Does anyone want to take a stab on the record in terms of the timing, keeping in mind that we don't know what's behind these walls in terms of how long we think this is going to take, and in terms of plus or minus how many years are we building into that based on what's behind the walls?
Yeah, and thank you again for the question. And I think the answer really lies a bit in your question. The critical thing is to complete these parallel activities of what is the expectation of parliamentarians for this building to deliver, and what is the condition of the building. And then we'll be able to, at that point, we'll have a real scope and then a schedule and a cost. And of course, we will be doing everything possible to make sure that this building serves the needs of Canadians, that Canadians can be proud of this building, and that it serves the needs of parliamentarians into the future, and to balance that with doing it as quickly and as in a cost-efficient manner possible.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Reid.
I've heard that one of the chief concerns with this building in particular is how to keep it safe in the event of an earthquake. That I've heard, I don't know if this is true, that in the event of a serious earthquake, this would be the most dangerous building to be in the city of Ottawa. Can I just ask about earthquake-proofing the building? I gather that is one of the chief expenses we face, but this is all based on secondhand information.
So part of the project will be seismic upgrading to the building. There is no seismic reinforcing in the current building. I wouldn't consider this the most unsafe building. We have weathered a fair amount of earthquakes to date, and the building has held fairly well, but it certainly doesn't meet the new codes that are established from 2011 for earthquake reinforcing. So as part of the project, we will be addressing that.
Okay. One of the early ideas that had been floated out there was, I'd be interested, I think, and we'd all be interested in getting your feedback on how, going forward, and how this issue is dealt with. I did get a chance to see, as did other members of this committee, the West Block and how that was being dealt with attempts to ensure that the stone and rubble walls would not bulge out and collapse under their own weight in the event of a seismic event. I heard that for this building, that was, for reasons I can't explain, not an adequate solution, that we needed to find new solutions that I assume would be much more costly. Is it the case that this building has unique issues based on its size or some other feature that render it particularly difficult to deal with, more complicated than the West Block was?
Thanks again for the question, and perhaps I'll start off and then maybe can hand it over to the architects. No decisions have been made at this point in how to seismically retrofit the center block. What I will say in all of the projects that we've undertaken over the past decade, including the Wellington Building, the West Block, as you referenced, the Government Conference Centre, seismic retrofitting or seismic upgrading to meet modern building codes has been a key element of the project. In the West Block, it is a stone masonry. It's a load-bearing stone masonry building, different from the Center Block. Center Block is one of the first steel structure, steel frame buildings, and so the stone is more of a facade. So it's a different type of building. And the Wellington Building and the Government Conference Centre were different buildings again. So in the case of the West Block, we used approximately 10,000 seismic reinforcing bars to kind of ensure that the 3 layers of the wall would respond in a harmonious way during a seismic event. In the Government Conference Centre, the use of new shear walls and stairwells and elevator shafts were primarily used for seismic reinforcing. And so again, it will probably be a different approach for the center block because it is a different building.
But before we move on to anybody else giving any thoughts on this question, you said this is a steel structure on which the stone is primarily a facade. That would suggest to me that it should actually be, I know there's more building here to deal with than there is in West Block, but pound for pound, if you like, or ton for ton, that it should be less expensive than it was in the case of the West Block. Is that the case?
I think it would be too early to indicate that. Certainly the Peace Tower is one of the tallest, slenderest elements that exist on Parliament Hill, so that is a challenge from a seismic reinforcement perspective. And you're quite right, the center block is quite a different building from the West Block, so a different approach will be required. I don't know if there's anything that you would like, that Centris would like to add.
Yes, thank you. We have a team of engineers as part of our team who've actually been working in this environment on the Hill for many, many years, so there's a lot of experience in that team. We're looking at options. As Rob Wright said, the building is constructed differently from the other buildings on the Hill. It's actually a combination of steel frame and load-bearing masonry. And so part of the investigations is totally understanding how that structure works today and to look at 2 or 3 different ways of solving the problem. Evaluate that with the construction manager, look at comparative costs, and then be in a position to make some kind of recommendation to move forward.
Okay, that's helpful. I have a general question. We're going to be coming back here, correct?
Yeah.
All right, so maybe it's something to mull over and respond to in more detail when we get back. Seems to me that there are essentially 3 conflicting things that we all want, which would be fastest possible time to completion, the lowest possible cost, and the largest number of features we can each think of on our wish list. We've all come along and had, each of us has expressed all 3 of these contradictory desires at various times. At some point, we are going to have to make compromises on some of these things. In the end, I can foresee a decade from now an outraged Canadian public looking at the total bill for this and saying some of the features you put in ought not to have been put in given the costs. Either we or our successors will be faced with dealing with that at the political level. So I'm just wondering how we ensure, what kind of structure is set up to ensure that those compromises that must be made get made by the kind of decision-making apparatus that the Canadian people ultimately would regard as being satisfactory. I probably used up almost all my time there, so there might be something just to mull over and get back, and maybe I should stop my question now and let people think about that.
Mr. Bagwell, if I could try to answer that question. The governance for the approval and the review of different scenarios such as that has not been put in place yet. Like right now, as we said, we're just working at the initial stage to understand the facility. But one of the mandates that the Speaker has been giving us is to actually put forward some recommendation as far as establish a governance model by which we will actually make these types of decisions. And this governance will certainly be engaging the members, so both at the requirements and also at the recommendations from a cost perspective. And these recommendations will also be vetted by the experts so that we can come with recommendations to parliamentarians by leveraging expertise either from this team or exterior to this team. But this would be vetted through a governance that would be approved by the members and certainly the board of internal economy of the House and also the Senate. So that model hasn't been established yet, Mr. Reid, but we're looking at putting something in place. It's a priority for myself, Mr. Wright, to actually come up with a model and come up with some recommendations for the speakers in early January so that we can move forward with that.
In a position then, when the House resumes at the end of January, to approach our own Speaker and inquire as to where he's heading on it.
Hopefully, we'll have a draft to him by that time, sir, and something could be put in place quickly so that we can move forward. That's the goal, sir.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you're including the Board of Internal Economy, and this committee, of course, is procedures for this House, and then the appropriate bodies in the Senate, of course, as well.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at the form, I assume someone's already passed on one of the inputs from many that will come from this committee on looking at, and you can see it in the minutes of our meeting from last year, a potential space for children either in the courtyard or in or near this particular building. So we've got 5 minutes to vote, so we better go, and we'll be back. You guys can there's coffee at the back and everything, so chat with the people in the room, and we'll be back as soon as the House of Commons allows us. Oh, suspend. Welcome back, everyone, to the 138th meeting of the Committee on the Center Block Renovation. Just, yes. Yeah. Where'd Mr. Reid go? Oh, and thank Mr. Reid for the gift to all committee members, so filibuster IPA. Thank you very much. And Mr. Obey, I think, is ready to answer the last question, maybe.
Well, we just wanted to make sure that we answered the question on governance, sir. Like,
Hold on 1 sec, I can't hear you.
We just wanted to make sure, sir, we answered the question on governance because everyone went to the vote after that. Is there any follow-ups on that, or is everyone okay? We'll be coming back and.
Sorry?
In my turn.
Okay. So, no, he didn't want to go right now. So we're going to Mr. Graham and then Mr. Nader and then Ms. Lapointe. He got on the list first.
Question for all of you. Have any of you ever served as an MP? Have any of you ever served as an MP or a senator? Have any of you ever worked on the Hill as a staffer of any sort within the precinct? None? All right. Who is approving the space requirements and allocations for both the Commons and Senate sides in the building? Who makes those decisions?
So typically, we work with the whip's office for space allocation based on the policy that was approved at the board.
Typically, but so who makes the final call? Okay.
For the space allocation?
For everything. So whenever there's a deciding decision made somewhere in this building, who makes that final call?
The Board of Internal Economy is our highest level of approval.
Okay. And they approve all the details, or do they have a grander scheme and you're left to somebody's discretion?
Yes, so it's when we come to the end of a key milestone, we go to the Board of Internal Economy with a higher level overview, and the staff work on a lot of the detail. We'll share that up to various levels of authority, sometimes the clerk, sometimes the speaker, depending on how much detail they actually want to be engaged in.
So the size of offices, for example, the allocations, floors, surface area, who would make that decision? Would it be the Board of Internal Economy? Would it be the speaker, the clerk,
right now,
staffer?
Yeah. So right now, the current requirements that we use for MP offices were established in the late 90s, and they were approved at the Board of Internal Economy, and that has been a standard that we've applied in every new renovation to date, the 90 square meters.
You're talking about the individual offices. I'm talking about the overall offices. So is the building... I want to make sure we don't come up with administrative buildings. I want to make sure this is our functional members' offices buildings. Like, who allocates how much goes to the clerks, how much goes to the members, how much goes to administration, how much goes to parking, how much goes to the locksmiths? Who does those allocations?
Okay, so when it comes to members, that was established, those requirements were established in Building the Future and approved at the board level. How many units, MP units they're called, are allocated to an MP, a minister, a leader of the party, etc. So those were established as a baseline, and that's what we have tried to follow where possible. Sometimes the buildings don't always allow for that, and then we negotiate a compromise if required. When it comes to the rest of the space allocation within the building, that essentially is approved at the clerk's level.
Okay, and it's the same thing applied on the Senate side?
I believe so, but I couldn't speak for them. I'm sorry.
Well, the building is a joint jurisdiction between the Commons and the Senate, so who would speak for the Senate side of this building? On this project?
On this project, the Senate has a parallel team to the House of Commons, and they use their governance process for their approvals.
Is there no overlap in this team here with the Senate work?
We work in partnership, but we don't provide services to them. So at some point, I'm assuming you're asking, at some point, how are we going to settle on who has what space within the building, and that will have to go through a joint governance process.
Okay. What percentage of the programs at functional program completion for Center Block?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
What's our percentage of the functional program completion for Center Block right now?
Functional program, we're still working on that. It's in the early phases. We're currently in receipt of about 50%, but it's not quite there for sure.
Okay. What year was Center Block originally supposed to close? In the original, when this plan first started, when was it supposed to close?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. The center block is essentially the apex project of the whole long-term vision and plan for the restoration and modernization of the parliamentary precinct. And from its very beginning in 2001, that the restoration and modernization of the center block has been one of the prime objectives. And so many of the other projects that have been carried out, the Sir John A. Macdonald, the Wellington Building, and more recently, of course, the West Block and Phase 1 of the Visitor Welcome Centre and the Government Conference Centre, have really all been about being able to empty the center block to carry this out. And so from its, one of the key drivers is the condition of the building, and we continue to do ongoing assessments of the building. 2019 has, from the very beginning, been kind of the prime objective for getting the center block emptied prior to 2019, when it was indicated through the assessments of the building condition that there would be an elevated risk of a building system failure that could impact the operations of Parliament. And of course, that's a prime objective, is to ensure that there's no interruption to the operations of Parliament. So a key...
I don't think we're going to stay off the same baseline here. What I'm asking is when it was originally planned, because what I've heard, I've been on the Hill for almost a decade myself, and I've heard that it was originally supposed to close in 1992. I want to know if that's true.
Well, I think if you go back into the history, there were several attempted renovations of the center block in the far past, but I wouldn't be able to go into the details of that. I think it is accurate that there were some planned restoration initiatives over a number of decades that didn't quite get to the point of realization. And one of the key elements is a kind of a robust swing space strategy, which the West Block and the Government Conference Centre and Visitor Welcome Centre provided the ability to empty the building into facilities that would support the operations of Parliament.
Okay. When I started on the Hill as a staffer, not long after that, a piece of rock fell off a ceiling somewhere in Center Block. I forget where it was. And Public Works told us at the time that they weren't sure they could keep the building standing past about 2017. Where is the safety of the building today?
Well, we continue to monitor the building on an ongoing basis. Health and safety is the #1 priority, and is really the real reason why we've been collectively putting all this effort to make sure that the building is emptied prior to 2019, when we have that assessment that there really is an elevated risk that there could be a building system failure. I would say in the center block, again, all the buildings are different. In the center block, the elevated risks are really around building systems, so mechanical systems, electrical systems, which if there was a failure, the operations of Parliament would be impacted. Whereas with the West Block, structural stability was the prime kind of critical factor facing that building.
Okay, I'm losing the floor, so I'll come back to you later. Thank you.
Just before we go on, I just want to clarify, Ms. Kulba, one of your answers to David. Basically, you said the final disposition of the percentage of rooms for MPs and senators and visitors and media would be, the final decision be made by the boards of Internal Economy of the House of Commons and the Senate?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nader.
Chair. I'd like to start by making a comment I made to the chair earlier that he'd mentioned before we broke about space for kids here on Parliament Hill. I want to say that I would personally benefit from that because my kids are 4, 2, and newborn right now. So by the time we get back here, my grandkids will be using that space. So I do want to say I appreciate that. I want to follow up a little bit with Monsieur Aubé about the governance structure. I think you'd mentioned that a draft of that governance would be provided to the Speaker of the House and I'm assuming the Speaker of the Senate as well. In the new year, is that correct?
This is what we're aiming for, sir.
Mm-hmm. And then would the Speaker have the authority to approve such a plan, or where would that?
So these are still discussions we're having between PSPC and us, because the Minister of PSPC is also accountable for the implementation of these projects. So we're looking at establishing a joint governance with PSPC that would engage the Minister and also the Speakers. That's why I'm saying it's still in a draft. We're having dialogue right now, but that hasn't been finalized and will need to be approved by both sides because, as you know, Mr. Wright has the mandate to actually deliver on these facilities, so we want to make sure that it's an integrated governance recognizing that the speakers play a key role in the decision-making process also.
So at some point then in the new year, there would be a decision made ideally by some form of joint, whether it's the minister with the speakers, making an approval of the governance structure. Is that the...
That's what we would be proposing, sir.
When that happens, or sorry, I should say prior to that happening, would this committee be privy to see a draft of that governance structure? Would that be...
I will take note of that, sir, and we can certainly have a discussion.
And
Yes.
perhaps we as a committee can follow up on that in the new year when that happens. Because I think there are, as parliamentarians, I think we do have some questions about where the leadership will rest and where the decisions
take
will be
note of
made.
that, sir.
But I appreciate that. To our architect friends, thank you for joining us. I read briefly online some of your past experience, and certainly your team seems exceptionally well versed. Would you have any specific examples of similar projects that members of your team may have undertaken in the past that might be on the similar scale as this project?
Thank you for your question. Yes, we have. Over the years, we've been involved in the restoration and renewal of a number of major government projects. In the UK, for instance, the Ministry of Defence main building, which was a building that is Grade 1 listed, so the British equivalent listing to Centre Block. That was over 1 million square feet of complete renovation and renewal, rehabilitation. We have been involved in the past in many other buildings in Whitehall, particularly the complete rehabilitation of the Foreign and Commonwealth offices, which are about 1.5 million square feet, and are currently involved or leading the rehabilitation of Buckingham Palace.
Excellent. No, thank you for that. I appreciate that. It was mentioned that the original architectural plans from Mr. Pearson may not have been entirely followed when this building was constructed, as I think many projects in that era may have been, which always begs the question, whether there are going to be known unknowns and unknown knowns that we encounter on this project. From your past experience, what would be the greatest risk with this project in terms of some of those unknowns that may creep up during this project? Would you hazard a guess?
I would say that in virtually any building, whether an old building or a new building, there is always some variance between the set of drawings and the building as it's built. I think that the risks here are less in the sense that it is a building of approximately 100 years old, so there are not the variations in construction quality and technique that you would find in a building built over 300 or 400 years. However, I think that we are doing a very thorough investigation right now, and investigations of all sorts of aspects of the building, because particularly in this case, it was an innovative building structure at the time to employ a steel frame, and it's a steel frame and some masonry as well. And so it's really that interface that we're going to be investigating carefully, especially because to create the upgrade for seismic upgrade, it will involve very carefully studying how those joints and connections are made.
Thank you very much. I may circle back in future rounds, but I appreciate that. I did have one final question for Public Works and Government Services. At one time, Treasury Board had project risk management assessments, PMRA, that were required for all major projects undertaken by government departments. I believe each department also had to self-assess their capability. 2 points. Did Public Works and Government Services undertake an internal assessment in terms of what their capacity is to manage such a project? And then the second corollary to that is, was a PMRA done on this particular project, what the rating was for that assessment, and whether you're confident that Public Works has the capacity to undertake the project?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So yes, there was the type of assessment that the reference made on the Centre Block. It's essentially a 4-point scale. The Centre Block was rated as a 3, on that assessment. And as within the department's assessment of its ability to manage projects of that size. And what I would add to that, now that's a departmental assessment within the parliamentary precinct branch. The approach on the center block also rests on 10+ years of restoring and modernizing the buildings within the precinct. So as I've mentioned, the West Block and the Government Conference Centre and the Wellington Building, the Sir John A. Macdonald, the Library of Parliament would be some of those examples, and there's a slew of others, but some of those examples of facilities that would present a variety of the challenges that we will see in the center block. And I would say that we are certainly much better positioned taking on this project as if we hadn't kind of cut our teeth and built capacity within industry as well over the past 10 years. So there's both been internal capacity and a significant amount of industry capacity that has been built over the past decade plus of experience. And so I would say we are full and ready for this project.
Thank you.
Merci. Maintenant, Madame Lapointe.
Ms. Lapointe, thank you, Mr. Chair. You surprised me a bit this morning. As the chair was saying earlier, when you renovate, when you design a house, we know ahead of time what's going to be done. The architectural plans are done, the blueprints are ready, we know what to expect. But that's not what I'm hearing from you. It's as if the consultations have not been done yet. It's as if the planning has not yet been done. I'm a bit surprised by this, particularly since the MPs have not been consulted, the parliamentarians have not been consulted. A month ago? I imagine you listened to Découverte on Radio-Canada. There's a radio program on the renovation of Parliament, and apparently we've been told that all the inventory has been done and that there will be no surprises. I just don't understand what you're saying. My question is for Mr. Wright. Thank you very much for your question. As I said, there are two phases to this type of project. First of all, the requirements, the building requirements, and the current situation or state of the building. It is absolutely essential that we take down the walls and the ceilings to understand the exact condition of this building. It's impossible to do so until the building has been completely emptied. And that's the case right now. With the start of the operations in West Block and the Government Conference Centre, we should be able to remove the ceilings and walls so that we can understand the current state of this building. I'm still surprised because when I listened to Découverte, it seemed to me that this work had been started quite a long time ago and that you know exactly what you were doing. When I buy a home, my plans are done before I begin the work. But what I'm getting to understand is you're going to shut down the Parliament without really, or a centre block without really understanding the needs. Do you know how you're going to divide all the space up? Thank you for your question. The state of the building, well, we're not talking about new construction here, such as a new house or any other type of building. We're talking about the state of a building that is completely different, and it's essential that we remove the ceilings, the walls, and all that in order to really appreciate and understand the situation and remove risk. That's important. I'm talking about the requirements of parliamentarians. Were consulted? Were people consulted? And if so, at what level? No, we've just started understanding parliamentarian needs. for a large, complex project such as this one, we have to do parallel tasks, and it's very common to begin with first by removing all of the property, the structures, and then to understand the needs of parliamentarians, the needs of the officials. That's very typical.
Construction in the interiors where those requirements are going to be set. So there's a very typical delivery in a fast track. You'll see it in a large building. You'll often see the hole in the ground being dug and the parking garage being poured, and the rest of the building hasn't been designed. It's very common in the complexity of this type of building where we need to assess those base building requirements. We need to understand what kind of structure there is, what kind of mechanical, electrical there is, all the while gathering the functional requirements which will feed into the later part of construction. Alors, on est à le début de le projet.
So we're just starting the project. We're just starting to understand requirements. You said that we're at the beginning. I had heard that the prep work, that the planning, that 50% was completed, that for the Senate, 65% of the planning been done. My colleagues were asking me, what are the needs of the Parliament? We want to have a more user-friendly Parliament, easier to use, but what are we going to do to adapt to this requirement? You said earlier that the building has been here for 100 years, the past, the present, the future. What do you consider when you're trying to make it more user-friendly? And how can we do this, or is this something you're just going to think about later? And Ms. Cuba or Mr. Wright, I'm prepared to listen to your answers.
Program, that's really the base requirements, and what we've done to establish that is we look at the existing standards that we fitted up in the buildings for members and some of the service groups, and so that's like a baseline. We haven't really even done any design. We've just gathered the very minimal baseline requirements, and now the consultation process will begin where we start to look at more detailed functional requirements, and that's why we need to start engaging with you. In terms of the family-friendly Parliament, we've heard that requirement even in the existing building. As you know, we have a family room in the center block because of those requirements, and we will be certainly looking about what kind of future family-friendly requirements will be needed, and we'll be looking to parliamentarians to feed into that functional requirement.
Mr. Wright, do you have anything to add? I have a very basic question. We talked about a concrete structure for the West Block, but nobody's able to give me any details. No one seems to say anything.
There is no direct loading dock, and so the temporary loading dock is being built there in the meantime.
Ça, c'est à côté de la statue Victoria, là? C'est une affaire qui est haute.
It's the one beside the Victoria building. Is it temporary? Yes. It's going to be temporary during the construction phase, so it'll be there for quite a few years, but then we'll have a strategy that will deal with the whole parliamentary campus. It'll be better managed, and we'll have all the materials. This is an initiative, and that applies to all of the Hill. So we're going to try and do this efficiently. At the same time, we'll be renovating the building as this is being done. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much for your presentation. As I've kind of rolled this around in my mind, it seemed to me most of what the function of the building is really not going to change. The basic, structural fundamentals. We've got a speaker, we've got the seats, the desks, the ability to stand up and talk and be recognized. That's not going to change even if they add electronic voting. And parenthetically, let me say any opposition member that votes in favor of that doesn't understand what's going on. because sometimes the only time you're on TV all week is when you vote. So opposition, keep that in mind. It's great for the government. Anyway, I can throw these things out because I'm not running again, so I could just cast these things out, and they're worth what everybody paid for them. But the things that struck me that have changed, the nature of some things that have changed that are fundamental to the building still, and I'm thinking of security. I'm thinking Canadians with disabilities. The media, the nature of the profession is changing, and their interaction with this place and us changes, the rhythm, the approach, the time they can spend. And now family-friendly parliament was mentioned. I had that on my list. I have to say, I was a little concerned when I heard the answer that we'll, and I wrote it down, we'll be looking to Parliament for feedback. Seems to me that Parliament ought to be the lead on family-friendly. Nobody, but nobody, understands better what needs to be done to make it family-friendly than MPs that have family. So, now it may have just been the way you responded, but words matter around here, and I would be very disappointed if your thinking is, oh, we'll ask parliamentarians for their feedback. No, seems to me parliamentarians should be the lead on family-friendly, since it's their families. So what I'd be interested in, Chair, is maybe some thoughts on, I mean, I've sort of criticized the way you're approaching the family-friendly Parliament. Obviously, you have a chance to correct that if I'm incorrect, or give me answers that are a little better. But I'd be interested to hear what your approach will be with regard to security. Having now sort of gotten the cart in front of the horse, in my opinion, when you said you were going to look for feedback from parliamentarians, I'm now listening very carefully as to what is the process, as you now have it, for determining what changes need to be made vis-a-vis security, Canadians with disability, and media as examples. What is your process for making those determinations, please? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, and I apologize for misuse of words. I certainly didn't intend any disrespect in the use of feedback. The word should be actually gaining your requirements. Essentially, we are looking at a consultative process. We don't have it fully ironed out now because it's related to the governance piece, and so we will be seeking consultation with parliamentarians on all those key issues and those detailed functional needs, and then incorporating that into the project through the governance process.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the process is, Chair. I just leave with you that if I was going to be here in the next Parliament, I'd sure want to be apprised of what the thinking is about the process before it's initiated, so that there's an opportunity to say, yeah, you got it right, and from our perspective, and we don't know everything, even though we like to think we do, but to hear exactly what your process is going to be, and if there are any changes, let's make them at the very front end rather than some crisis meeting, 7 years from now, and oh, we forgot to consider that. So I just leave with you that I as one member, if I were here in the next Parliament, would be very interested in receiving a briefing when you have fleshed out what's the process for consultation and the process for decision making. Thank you all very much for your presentation, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Graham, Mr. Sims, Ms. Sahota.
I'm just going to ask a quick question off of what Mr. Christopherson was saying, and then I'll pass it over to David because he's got lots of questions still. But in terms of the process, how we've been talking a lot about going to the Board of Internal Economy in order to get details approved is what I believe you had mentioned earlier. How about getting that process approved? Who is going to approve the process that you're going to use to gain this feedback and do these consultations? How are we going to know what that process is ahead of time so that, like Mr. Christopherson said, we're okay with that process?
So, if I can just start. So, as you know, we report directly to the Speaker. So my first approach would be going to the Speaker's office with the recommendations, and then we'd be leveraging the appropriate committees, such as the board or this committee, to seek the approval of the recommended governance that we'd like to put in place for approving requirements or also approving solutions to meet these requirements from a solutions perspective and a design perspective. So the first step would be going through the speaker, okay, speaker's office, being from the administrative, but it would be done also in consultation with PSPC because, as you know, any requirements that we set forward will have an impact on cost, risk, and also implementation. So this would be a joint partnership between PSPC and us. And then we'd
So
be
it seems like we might just get cut out of this whole process because you're going to go to the speaker and then decide. But at what point do parliamentarians get to decide about whether we're okay with that process?
I would not say so. If you understood this comment from my statement, I'm sorry, ma'am. What I'm saying is that we want to get the governance approved through the Speaker's office, okay? And surely, okay, if we're here today is because there's been a key requirement from the Speaker to engage parliamentarians. I just can't speak to a solution today because we haven't established it yet. And I would like to for him to actually, because we're reporting to the Speaker, to have actually a view of it before we would possibly come back for even discussion with committees such as here and also the board. Okay?
Okay.
But we're certainly taking note that there is certainly some interest for this committee to come in here, and I will actually make sure I relay that back.
I think you got that message. Yeah, just following up, Ruby said it. I think it's incumbent on all parties to, knowing that process, to they all have members on the Board of Internal Economy and make sure that they communicate with the Speaker that they want to be involved. And Mr. Graham, and the advantage of Mr. Graham is he's been both a staff member and an MP here, so he understands functional needs very well of the building.
Yeah. I just want to make a comment before I get my questions. I think we'll have to follow this process much more closely than we followed West Block as Brock and as members. And I think as we move in the next 2 weeks, we're going to see that it would have been nice to have this conversation 10 years ago, at least maybe with Joe and things. But, so let me start with reminding you all you're on the record. And I would like to hear from you what year we will really move back into Center Block.
Thank you very much for the question. As soon as possible. But as I indicated earlier, really the next year will be about establishing, through both the functional programming exercise and the full assessment of the condition of the building, the scope which will drive the schedule and the budget for the project. So it is, I would say we're too much of a preliminary phase to speak to the scope, and which then flows into creating a budget and a schedule. So it's the functional programming that you have indicated you very much want to be involved in, which will be a key driver of the timing and the budget.
Okay, I do have a specific question. I've heard, and as Larry mentioned, I've been a staffer in MP a long time here on the Hill. A lot of support staff, I know them from my time staffing, and I've heard numerous rumors about an elevator built in West Block that didn't go down far enough, and resulting in $1 million of spare parts that can't be used because they're custom made. And that is how we ended up with the temporary loading dock to Seabus behind. Can you confirm or deny this? Is there any truth to this?
There's no truth that I'm aware of to that. No.
Okay, good. So the loading dock. When was the loading dock planned to be built outside of the government lobby? Because I noticed this concrete structure that materialized recently.
Right. Yeah. So and perhaps the House can speak to that as well. So the loading dock, the temporary loading dock that is there now, was not part of the initial scope of the West Block. As part of the broader long-term vision and plan, there are plans around permanent material handling facility on Parliament Hill, which is not in place yet. So a temporary solution was required. Currently, there's a loading dock in the center block that can be used until the center block is fully decommissioned. As you heard, would take several months. So the loading dock, the temporary loading dock, has to be in place by the time that the center block is fully decommissioned. But until that point, the loading dock that is currently at the center block serves the West Block appropriately.
So there is no loading dock built whatsoever into West Block in its construction. It was always planned to have loading done through center.
No, well, so there was a plan to have a long-term material management and loading dock facility aligned with the opening of the West Block, which did not occur. There were some adjustments to the long-term vision and plan, so we shifted to a temporary solution.
So the long-term vision plan had planned for a loading dock and dropped the plan for loading dock?
To the west of the
Right.
West Block was the original plan, yes.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So what was the consultations with members and staff on the construction of West Block as we now know it? Can anybody speak to that, to the process and the involvement of members in that process?
Again, for the West Block, our consultation was through the Board of Internal Economy, but at a very high level, and we've learned that probably is not the best way to go, and that's why we're here engaging with you, and we're hearing what you're asking for, and we're trying to change that going forward so that parliamentarians will be involved through the process of the centre block for sure.
So you mentioned earlier that there's a prescribed allocation of MP's offices in the building, as we discussed for Centre Block. So how much backbench MP office space is there in West Block?
MP office space, there, as you know, I'm sure it's about the leadership. There is not a lot of room. The West Block is not a very large building, and so the primary objective was to fit the chamber and as much MP space in there as we could, and so it's resulted in a fairly little amount of office space.
Okay. When we finish Centre, do we have to close West Block again?
The current plan would be to reconvert the chamber into committee rooms, and that was what was established in 2001. It doesn't mean that that's going to be the final plan. So at this point, I would say we're going to have a good look at that together with the parliamentarian needs at the time and determine on whether or not those renovations go forward, or if there are other requirements at that time that are, more pertinent.
Thank you.
If I may be so bold in suggesting something, Bruce Stanton has a great article called The Parallel Chamber, maybe a topic of conversation. And they have parallel chambers, by the way. Great article. I think it's in the Parliamentary Magazine. I can send it to anybody in this committee. Our Deputy Speaker, Bruce Stanton. They have parallel chambers in both Australia as well as the UK. They work very well, very efficiently. I think something we should give to my colleagues, let's give this serious consideration for the conversion of, we can even do it before that, but certainly for the conversion of West Block back to just committee rooms, we should think about that. I have a question as former press person about the press hot room, as they call it. You've probably already answered this, and I'm going to ask it again. Do you currently have a press room in West Block?
There is a space, sir, for the yacht room in the West Block.
A space for?
The press, where our press conferences will be held also, sir. And there's also a green room in the back of it. A green room also in the back of it, sir, for any television requirements that would be required also.
Oh, for television video requirements?
Yeah.
And you have the sound booth there as well? Or
yeah.
How does it compare to the current one here?
In terms of space for the press itself, there's less space for their offices, and they also have, in part of the requirements, have expressed that it wouldn't be enough, so accepted space in the National Press Building for some of the staff. But the room that Mr. Obey is referring to is the replacement for the Charles Lynch room, and essentially it's probably a little bigger, and it's obviously more modern in terms of technology.
Okay, because we got two different things here. We've got a room for them to do their work, call it a designated workstation, whatever you wish, but we also have the studio down here. So I guess what I'm asking about is not so much the Charles Lynch room, but this room called, where they
the
were.
hot room.
That's right.
Right.
So there are no plans to have one there?
Well, there is, yes, there is space for what they're calling, we just aren't necessarily calling it the hot room, but I mean, if you will, there is space for them there. And they have additional space in the National Press Building because it's not as large, the West Block space is not as large
So
as
the
their
studio
current.
has the actual studio, a green room, as well as workstations
No, there is a separate space for them.
within West Block?
Yes.
Within West Block, okay. And obviously, it's not as big as the one here, but nevertheless, dealing with space, okay. And you consulted with the media on this?
We consulted through the press gallery. At the time, it's currently Colin Lafrance is our contact to who represents the press gallery, and he works with us to determine requirements.
Okay. So the speakers, place, like we're looking at back here, you've got room, obviously the office, you've got larger space for entertaining. If people come in, you know, certain special foreign guests, so on and so forth. Obviously not as big as it is here, but in comparison, how big is it?
I couldn't give you the square footage right now off the top of my head, but we can come back with it.
Yeah, okay, all right.
You know, in terms of, I would say it's a different building, right? The corridors in the West Block run down the center of the wings, and so all the rooms are narrower, and so that's why I'd have to go back and check on the figures for you.
Okay, no, I see what you mean with the smaller hallways. So, in this particular case, with the way it is laid out there right now, in your opinion, which part of the current center block, and I'm meaning House of Commons functions now, will be diminished over in West Block? MPs' offices?
Certainly.
Administration?
I think all the requirements were reduced going into the West Block, knowing it was a smaller building. Certainly there are less MP offices, and the administration is in smaller offices. All the services have been reduced. Everyone has compromised.
What's
to
the
fit
comparison there, administration offices compared to MPs' offices?
I would have to go back and get you a figure on that.
Okay. Hey, and these are all what we originally set out to do. Has anything changed since we first began? Like, have there been modifications for the MP's offices? Because I think what you're saying is that, and pardon my ignorance on the issue, but the offices are the same as what you would expect any MP. It's just there are less of them.
Yes, correct.
And that was your intention there from the beginning.
Well, it was part of the design because the building is much smaller than the center block. You just cannot put as much function that we have the ability, the square footage here in center block. Just we didn't have that availability in the West Block.
So for the administration was the same thing? The offices are the same size as here, except there are less of them?
No, they're reduced and there are less of them.
They're reduced and there are less of them?
Yes.
In administration. All right then.
And in stage 2 of the West Block, once we return to center block, it's intended that all of that administration space and higher end offices will convert to MP space, MP offices.
Okay. That's fine.
Thanks, Chair. I got to tell you, I could be wrong, but I really feel like there was kind of a wake-up call being recognized by our witnesses here that there's a whole different approach to doing center block than was done with West Block in terms of input, which is kind of surprising, but it is what it is. I guess it's better the wake-up call came now rather than 7 years from now, or in the case of West Block, after the fact. So I'll characterize that as a good thing, even though it's somewhat surprising. I want to compliment Mr. Sims. I think it's absolutely brilliant that the Parliament, the next Parliament, or the one after that, whenever they do it, wrestles with this idea of a second chamber. A few of us were interested in that when it first came up, and I think it was here, and we had quite a discussion, and we didn't even know it existed. And when the idea of a parallel chamber was mentioned in the context, not of helping the government out by giving them more time per se, whoever the government is, but an opportunity for more members' time, because it runs parallel, and I think that's what most of the other chambers do. But I got to tell you, when I first heard that, I think a few of us were kind of, hey, now there's an idea. without changing the dynamics of the place, without changing, you know, anything really. It's an add-on. But my point is to have that discussion while the chamber still exists in West Block, because that could very easily provide the footprint, and what a great place to have it in one of the main buildings on the hill. So I just want to compliment Mr. Sims, and I hope that that the next PROC is seized of that issue and initiates that debate to wrestle with it, because I think there's a good chance that future parliaments might go with that. I really do. I think it's something could be added without jarring everything else that, good or bad, that we've evolved to in our 150 odd years. Yeah, that begs the question. I do have a question. Just in terms of planning, if we went with if they did go with the second chamber, it sounds like the future of West Block in terms of the reconversion is not finalized, which would make good sense. So let me ask the question: is it the way it seems to me to be a prime time-wise opportunity to be looking at a parallel chamber that Mr. Sims, I mean, I thought it's a good idea. Yeah, so what? But you folks are the ones that are actually going to be on the ground. What do you think in terms of the timing of having that discussion vis-a-vis if we're going to have any kind of a secondary chamber? We already got one built. Just your thoughts on that off the top of your head.
Yes, I think it is a good time, because as we progress in through the center block renovation, we're going to have to already start thinking about what we do with the West Block once it comes to moving back into the center block. So, you know, we'll want to know that well in advance, what that final use of the West Block is.
And just one last thing I'll throw out there, Chair, and this might be a bridge too far, I don't know, but it doesn't seem that crazy to me. Since we're recognizing that these kind of projects require more than just very competent, capable, professional folks, which you all are, but it takes more than that to build a parliament. And we're now talking, and I think we're making it very clear, that parliamentarians need to have a say. The journalists and the professional media need to have a say. The security people, obviously, I would assume that's a no-brainer. But, so, as we go forward, the budget. I just want to ask about the budget. I'm going to add an idea, but I want to ask a question that just occurred to me. Is the budget fixed?
Thank you for the question. No, at this point, the baseline budget or schedule has not been firmly established. That requires the information from the functional programming and the final assessment of the building condition.
Okay. Last thing I'd throw out, Chair, is might be an idea that for at least maybe a week, that there be an opportunity for the public to have a say before everything is finalized. Now, obviously, not every Canadian can go through here, but with the current communications means, you can bring this to everybody's living room, and they can have an opportunity to give input, and that would allow all those brilliant architects, those former parliamentarians that are out there, citizens who obviously have a vested interest in their parliament, and an opportunity, a formal opportunity for that feedback as almost the last piece. As everybody else has given their professional input, how about one step back, put the whole thing out there to the nation and say, okay, Canadians, what do you think? We're about to finalize this. You got an opinion? We really want to hear it. So that might be something that we might want to build in, and I'll relinquish the floor with that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Christopherson. Et maintenant, Madame Lapointe.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Madame Lapointe. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to piggyback on what Mr. Christopherson was saying. What I'm understanding is that the budget has not been fully fleshed out, nor are the plans ready. So you said that a house was not a parliament building, and that before we begin renovations, we always know what we should be expecting to have at the end and what the idea behind it is. So I'm a little surprised by your answers. In principle, when we're dealing with taxpayers' money, we need to know where we're headed. I have a specific question for Ms. Kulba. You talked about square footage earlier. Do you know how much square footage is in the new House Commons? And what about West Block? Do you know how much square footage there is for the House of Commons in the Centre Block and for West Block? Percentages. Now, the percentage in space for the whip's office, for MPs, for administration, and for ministers and the speaker's offices in terms of a percentage. We're going to the West Block. What is the percentage for the same thing? I imagine that it would be possible to get these figures because what I'm getting is that we don't know how much we have in terms of square footage here and there. I'd like to have a specific answer, please. I will I've noted the question. I will provide the details.
Answer on that point.
And just on the same topic, I assume if we don't get through all the questions, because David has 27 rounds, that you would be prepared to answer to our researcher, our clerk, with some written answers to some other questions if we don't get through them all.
We will, sir.
Mr. Reid?
Question that what David's fundamental point is not that he has more questions today, but that as time goes on, more questions will arise, and that this committee ought to play an oversight role unless we can feel confident that some other committee of the House of Commons is doing the same thing. That would be a fair assessment?
Confidence.
I don't have that confidence either. That's not the fault of the individuals here. It's just, I think, a fault of the fact that we have a process that has been rolling along inevitably due to the deterioration of this building and the fact that technology is changing. We just have to figure out a practical management structure for the next decade or whatever it turns out to be. I had further thought, but maybe I should wait to. If there's something else.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe I'll put you ahead of Mr. Reid's next round. I mean, Mr. Graham's next round, because he's had a few. So do you want to go for?
Yeah, it's just this thought.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to comment on what you just said, though. I spoke to the speaker a few minutes ago, and he said it's incumbent on us to express our interest, too, and I think we've done that today. So if we didn't express an interest, then we weren't involved before. But go ahead with what you were going to say.
Well, so I got my start. The very first job I had, other than being a paper boy, was working as a draftsman at an engineering firm, Clement Large Patterson Consulting Engineers in Ottawa's West End. And we were involved when I started working there with just the wrap-up part of the renovation of the East Block. The East Block had been undergoing renovations that were just finishing up in 1981 when I started there. East Block now, with the passage of some 35 odd years, is now once again requiring some renovation. And I do remember at that time that part of what was going on was dealing with the previous sets of renovations. There had been one in 1910 and one at a somewhat later point in time, which makes the point that really we're not talking about doing a renovation of a building. We're talking about a constant upgrading, modernizing process, both for this building, for East Block, of course, eventually for West Block, even though right now it's brought up to a very high standard. I don't know if how Public Works, how you folks treat this kind of thing. If you have some kind of plan for this kind of cyclical upgrading and renovation, I'd just be interested in your thoughts in that regard.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. And we've been focused quite a bit on the restoration modernization of the Centre Block, which is the key parliamentary building, of course, and it's set within a broader parliamentary precinct, of which there's many critical assets. And so what I would say, we have at Public Service Procurement Canada, we really have what I would call 3 buckets of approaches for the facilities here. One is the major restoration and modernization, of which the center block would fall into, as well as the west block, as you referenced, which is usually requires the emptying of the building and a complete overhaul, stem to stern, of the building to bring it up to state-of-the-art condition, modern building codes, as well as modernizing the facilities. But what we also do is what we call recapitalization and repair projects. So and the recapitalization projects are done in occupied buildings to essentially take care of fairly large segments of the building. And the East Block, as you referenced, is undergoing a recapitalization right now of 4 of the entrances and towers that were in very poor condition. And that is to ensure that the building can continue operating in a safe condition and to reduce the costs of downstream major overhaul projects, as well as a repair bucket to make sure that we have an ongoing maintenance program to ensure that the buildings don't rust out as they did in the past. And the last point I would make, when we do these major overhauls, we really pay attention to try and get the maximum life cycle out of them so that we don't have to empty them for a very extended period. The goal here is to have a very robust program in place so that we are not in the situation that we have been over the past decade and face in the current situation.
Thank you.
Okay, just before I go to Ms. Graham, I have a really quick question, so really short answer. But I understand a couple of months ago, there's lots, as you said, there's towers, there's lots of nooks and crannies in this building. My understanding is a couple of months ago, the speaker asked for a tour of those nooks and crannies in this building. Has that occurred?
Not that I'm aware of. He may have had a tour with somebody else other than us, but from my team, that's not something I'm aware of.
Yeah, I think it was your team he asked. Okay, Mr. Graham.
To a couple of quick comments, Mr. Reid, Mr. Christopherson, before I get back to my questions. One, Scott, I was born in '81, so it's interesting to hear your history, so thanks for that. And I do want to... Oh, I'm sure it'll come. But you're right. What I want is a recurring meeting. I want this to happen again and again. And whether all of us or none of us are here next Parliament, PROC needs to sit down with this group at least once or twice a year and say, where are we? How is it going? And and catch the things before it becomes a problem instead of, oh, look, we missed that 7 years ago, which is what I think is going to happen with West Block when we move there in a few weeks. And Mr. Christopherson, you were talking about public consultations. We would do it for an intersection at a town, right?
I was thinking of in my municipal days was we wouldn't dare do that to City Hall without asking Hamiltonians what they think.
Well, exactly. And the other question was you're saying we have to talk to security. Now, do we talk to the union or the management? Anyhow, I'll leave that one alone for the moment. When we closed West Block in 2010, what year did we plan to reopen? Do you remember?
Thank you very much for the question. So, yeah, if memory serves, and I was around then, we closed West Block in early 2011. And the initial plan, I believe, was 2018, but I'd have to go back and look at some documents.
Okay, as a staffer, I was told that it'd be back in 2014, possibly 2015, so I just want to put that out there. In 2012, this is related but not directly, in 2012, I think it was 2012, the lawn between Justice and Confederation Building got shut down to the public to build a tunnel between the buildings. It was supposed to take a year. 6 years later, that lawn still has not reopened, and as far as I know, we have no access to that tunnel. Can you address that at all, and are we going to see that kind of problem again up here?
So that tunnel was closed. It was to implement a steam line through, and that work was completed. And then there's been a continual program of work on those buildings with recapitalization work, especially on the Confederation building. So PSPC has been using some of that space for construction yard, and some of the area around the Confed itself is not safe because of the work that's going on above, and so that's why it hasn't been reopened. But if that work gets completed, then there should be no reason to open the lawn.
No reason not to, you mean?
No reason not.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure of that. Is it important that we keep the chamber in the same physical shape as it is today? Or is this the opportunity to rethink how the chamber itself is structured? Or is that somewhere, a place we can't go?
Well, that's the $1 million question, because our parliament is still growing, and as you know, in 2015 we had to find a solution on how to fit additional members into that chamber. So the chamber itself is a high heritage value, and so these are some of the tough questions that we're going to be asking ourselves and yourselves, and coming up with a solution to be looking at those items.
Okay. My last question for the moment, to everybody's relief, will be, you mentioned in your opening comments that the building wasn't built to the blueprints that we have. Can you expand on that? That seems like a very bizarre statement. So the building, we have blueprints, we have architectural plans, and the building doesn't actually match that. Is that correct?
Correct. It was constructed over a 4-year period, and I think we've talked about the fact that at that period of time, steel was a new product, and it was actually the architect who decided to be a little more innovative and start to experiment with some of those materials. And so, rather than redoing all the plans, they implemented some of those changes on site, and that's what we're left with.
With no documentation.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Nader.
Thank you, Chair. And I only have one kind of brief question, but it has to do with the Peace Tower. I did read an article not too long ago that Dr. McCready would still be doing carry-on concerts for a period of time while this place is under construction. But am I right to assume that at one point the carry-on will be silenced? And if we have a time frame on what that would be. And then the second point as well is the Peace Tower flag. So I think most Canadians see the flag at the top of the Peace Tower is a very important symbol. I always love seeing it fly. But will there come a time where the flag will not be able to fly from the top of the Peace Tower and or be changed on a daily basis? Will there be a point? I mean, I think in the UK, there was a strong public backlash when Big Ben was going to be silenced for a period of time. And I think Canadians may have a similar viewpoint if the carry-on is silenced and if that flag is no longer flying. So I'm curious if and when that might happen.
Right. So we're very aware of that, and our intent is to keep the Carillon going as long as possible. And I'll turn it over to my colleagues about the schedule.
Yeah, and I'll ask Ms. Garrett maybe to add some more details. Thank you for the question. So maybe I'll start with the flag. The intent is to really try and keep the flag flying throughout the duration of the entire restoration. There may be a very short period, we may have to replace the flagpole, things like that, but really it would be about keeping the flag flying every day that we possibly can during the duration of the restoration. I think the Carillon is a little more complex because at this point part of the scope would be to fully restore the bells. So there would be a time that the Carillon in the Peace Tower would not be able to fully operate, but as Ms. Kulba indicated, we are working to keep that going as long as possible and have it come back online as quickly as possible as well. I don't know if Jennifer, if you want to add anything.
Thank you. I would just add that there is a lot of understanding that maintaining a positive visitor experience for anybody visiting the Hill is going to be very important during the renovation. And to that end, we've actually had some very detailed discussions with our construction manager, PCL Ellis Dawn, and we have a commitment that the Carillon will be able to play up until at least 2022, and by that time we'll have a detailed understanding of our approach to the construction, and we'll be able to provide further information on plans around the Carillon.
And just one kind of side point is that last summer, Dr. McCready was in my riding of Perth Wellington in Stratford for Stratford Summer Music, playing a mobile carry-on. So perhaps come 2022, there may be some alternatives for a carry-on of some form here on Parliament Hill for that visitor's experience. But that's all I have at this point, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Reid.
Just regarding the steel structure and the fact that we don't have accurate drawings of this, is it the case that normally you have as-built drawings with any engineering project or architectural project? Is it the case that these just weren't done, or is it the case that they were done up to the standards of the day, which were different than they are today? And then the obvious question is, I assume that we can make the assumption that with regard to the recently completed West Block and any other work going forward, there would be very thorough as-built drawings. I'm sure that our initial plans for West Block were altered at some point. I wonder more ways in the course of construction.
Thank you for the question. Maybe I'll pass the details over to the architectural team. But to the West Block, I would say that for buildings of this vintage, it's not uncommon to run into that issue at all. So it's a common issue. One thing that we've done on the center block to reduce risk on a go-forward basis is to create a building information model. So a 3D model of the building, which is going to really facilitate the design work, help to the functional programming work, and could be a great tool to make visual presentations to parliamentarians about how the building could work in the future, and will also have a great benefit for operations when it comes back online as well. And of course, with the West Block, yes, on a go-forward basis, that we've taken great care to ensure that we've not repeated some of the issues of the past. But I'll hand it over to the architectural team to add any more details.
Okay, just on the record of what was built, there's actually incredible high-definition black and white photography of the construction. So our engineers have a lot of detail of literally people bolting connections together in the steelwork. So that, in conjunction with the drawings that they do have, allows them to start the story. The investigations is what completes the story. So that deals with the issue here. So there's quite good records. As Mr. Wright said, the building information model, which you are probably aware of from the work that Carleton University did before the project, is something that is being continued to be built on. We continue to work with Carleton University to refine that model and add new information to it as we go and as we discover things. So a very complete record of what is here and what is going to be done.
Thank you. Before we go to Mr. Sims, would anyone that has to leave mind if we stayed a few minutes later for people that want to ask questions? Is that okay? You have to go? Well, that's so too bad.
That's not an endorsement.
Thanks, Chair.
So we have Mr. Sims and then Mr. Graham.
Actually, I think Mr. Graham and I had the same question. Do you want? Can I? Okay.
I have another one afterwards anyway.
I have a stupid comment to begin with. To our architectural team, you're from the UK, is that right?
Thank you for the question. I was born in the UK. I actually have lived in Canada the last 6 years, and my walk to work is 10 minutes.
How about that?
Yes, so the accent might be a bit of a giveaway.
Oh, I'm just wondering. I was going to ask when Big Ben is coming back, since we're talking about.
Larry may be able to help you.
Well,
with
actually,
that.
for bragging rights, they shut down Big Ben, but we're not shutting ours, so you can say that. Anywho, the Memorial Chamber, very special. It's such an people are literally blown away by the Memorial Chambers. A lot of people who don't know that it exists go there and absolutely stunned by its. Obviously by its honor and just by the emotional aspect of it as well. Can you comment on what we're doing with the Memorial Chamber?
Yes, so it will be closed as part of the renovations, and acknowledging that it's such an important space for what it represents. We engaged with Veterans Affairs, who are the actual owners of the Books of Remembrance, and the House of Commons, and we've decided that it was very important to keep the books on the Hill, and as such, Centris has designed a new space, a temporary space in the Visitor Welcome Center for those books during the closure of Centre Block.
Oh, and it will be treated as it was before. People can go in and out in an orderly fashion over at the Visitor Center.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. They all are. I want to make sure, first of all, that you're taking as many good pictures of these renovations as you received from the last ones. That's a yes? Oh, yeah, And further to the Memorial Chamber comment, if you're standing in the Peace Tower today and you look at West Block, there is a tower on West Block. It has a glass floor at the same level as the Peace Tower's observation deck. Is that going to be open to the public? Is there any plan for that? Is it possible to be as an alternative Peace Tower for the next 25 years?
I just want to make sure that I thank you for the question. I think you're referring to the Mackenzie Tower.
Correct.
Yeah. When we started the West Block project, there was an assessment of whether the Mackenzie Tower could be turned into occupiable space. There was no feasible way to meet modern building code in the Mackenzie Tower. So the Mackenzie Tower although the Prime Minister's office is at the base and there's a family room space above that, in the tower proper to the full height, there's really no functional space within that.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? I guess it goes without saying that probably don't even have to answer, but all the ornate carvings and ornate woodwork in some of the offices and stone carvings and bullet holes and everything will remain as part of history in the renovation.
Yes, it is certainly our intention to, as much as possible, maintain, restore, and keep the heritage of the building, all of the main heritage spaces which have been already identified. We recognize the value that the building has in terms of its history, its symbolism, and the quality that it conveys, that it was built 100 years ago and reflects kind of the values, the traditions, and really the aspirations of the Canadian people. And so we want to preserve that, and then in the extension of the Visitors Welcome Centre Phase 2, as much as possible, try to convey contemporary Canada as well within that building. But what you see will be restored and retained.
Mr. Reid?
Yeah, just on this as well, I think these are questions that are probably not really for the architects. They're more things I would like to get on the record for policymakers, more in our normal role where we're trying to get those who are in higher decision-making bodies than ourselves to take them to account. But I would like to go on the record as saying that I believe we ought to preserve unhidden the bullet holes from the tragic events of October 2014 so that they can be seen by any visitor. Of course, I'm referring not merely to the bullet holes around the plaque in honor of Alpheus Todd, but also there are two bullet holes in the desk in the library, and there's one in the door, sort of the opposition room. I'm not sure we want to keep those doors in place. Maybe other reasons for getting rid of them, but these are records of something important that happened here, and we strive to make this the peaceable kingdom, as the moniker has it. But the fact that we haven't always succeeded doesn't mean we should cover up those aspects of our past. I realize you aren't the folks making the decision, but those are my own views on that. I wanted to ask about not the memorial chamber, but the word I think that was being searched for was people are struck by how beautiful it is. That's what it is. It's a very spiritual place. But I want to ask about the memorial books themselves. I assume they're being moved and they will be in a separate spot and will continue to be treated in the same manner and available to the public during the renovation period. Is that correct?
That's correct. The new space that Centris has designed in the Visitor Welcome Centre will be where they are moved to. The altars that they're currently on, which have been created a number of years ago, will be physically moved over with the books, and it will be open to the public as it is currently in the centre block.
Okay, people will see that after they go through security, I assume.
Yes.
As opposed to before. Okay.
Yes.
After 17 and a half years enjoying having an office in this building, in fact, my office was directly above that oval green shape up there. On the 4th floor. I've been moved out against my will to the Confederation Building. I'm not complaining, but I do have this question about the Confederation Building. It too has a tower. The building was built almost exactly the same time as the new center block was built and completed, in that case, in 1931. Atop the tower was a bronze statue of what was seen as the most modern transportation, a biplane, which served as a weather vane. At some point, I assume it just stopped actually rotating in the wind, was taken down, and it's vanished. So my question is, for things like that, I'm actually curious about that particular item itself, because I don't think it should be destroyed or removed. I think eventually it should get back up there when we finish doing our work on Confed Building. Well, let me just start with that one. We're dealing with secondary buildings that are part of the Hill Precinct. They're not as iconic as this one, but they nonetheless have great historical value. May I assume that items like that are being preserved and the intention is to restore them at some point in their original form?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. And yes, absolutely. In fact, all of the heritage assets within the parliamentary precinct, we take great care in the planning and the future restoration and modernization. The Confederation Building is certainly one of those facilities that is in the plans to be fully restored on a go-forward basis, including the old weather vane that unfortunately several years ago had to be removed because it was posing a health and safety risk, and the plan would be to reinstate that in due time.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Chair?
Yeah, Mr. David?
I'm just going to ask, in the interest of ensuring as best we can in this Parliament that PROC continues to play the kind of oversight that I think the majority, if not all of us, agree should happen, is it in the best interest of PROC to notationally schedule a follow-up briefing? So it's at least there. The clerk of the next committee can advise the committee that this was suggested or set aside as a time, because no parliament can bind a future parliament. But again, to do everything we can to make sure this doesn't fall off the table, because time is the enemy, as we're learning with West Block, finding out that there's issues that, hey, a little bit of input at the front end might have made a big difference in the operation. So I just leave that with you, Chair. I don't even know if we can or not, but I think it's certainly within our purview to leave a suggested date, say maybe 6-8 months in, after they get settled and get into a routine, that the clerk and the chair of the day brings it back to the committee and says, hey, the last committee in the last Parliament thought that this might be a good time, and then they can be seized of the issue and decide whatever it is they're going to decide at that time. So I'll just leave that with you, Chair, as a belt and suspenders, and sort of making sure that we don't lose this thing.
Yeah, we won't lose this. My understanding from what Ms. Kubler said, there'll be a lot more engagement before that, like in the near future, as they work on the plans. So I'm certainly glad everyone accepted my suggestion to have this meeting. I think a lot of good communication's been done and a great path forward to have a very successful center of our democracy for the people and for everyone involved in a very important building for Canada. And it's great to have such professionals as you working on it, and as we work on it together as a team. I think we have a much better path forward now. It's very exciting, so thank you very much. And for the committee, if House is still sitting Thursday, we'll do our meeting on the report, and if it's not, we probably won't meet. It's okay? Okay, thank you everyone. Merci.